Hey, welcome to the Virtually Speaking podcast. As you probably know by now, we're doing a full series on VCF 9. There's so many great things to talk about. And John, I love talking to this guy, Rick Walsworth, because he always knows what to say. Not only is he my boss, but he's actually a pretty well-informed guy when it comes to VCF. Rick, welcome back.
Thank you. It's always good to be here, guys.
So Rick, it's launched for VCF 9. There's a lot of blogs out there. People are going to dive deep into all the different features and the updates and all that stuff. But from your perspective, what do we need to know about VCF 9 compared to, say, previous versions?
Yeah, I mean, first off, it's glad to finally be available, right? I mean, we've been talking it now for, it feels like over a year, and it's certainly been more than that in planning. So it's finally good to see it come to realization. But, a couple of things that I think of, especially compared to previous versions of it, is around really that user experience, right? And when we look at users, we look mainly at that cloud infrastructure admin, those that are essentially responsible for, deploying net new infrastructure and then enabling services as part of that. But then we also look at the consumer, right? Who is essentially taking these infrastructure services and now essentially building apps and code on top of it to be able to run that. And both of those users essentially have a new experience as part of it. If you think about it, and again, it's a little about calling your baby ugly, but some of it is effectively the way we asked customers to be able to integrate the solutions before, right? We would effectively deliver a bill of materials where they would get this bill of materials and then they'd essentially start assembling this. We wrote some code that brought it all together. And it wasn't the best experience. And we certainly heard through CTAB and through a number of customer conversations that, it's good, but it could be better. And so we really took that advice to heart in terms of trying to develop a platform that really does deploy as a single solution. So really there's no more thinking about, vSphere, vSAN, NSX, ARIA all together. This is now essentially a single platform that deploys automatically, allows you to be able to go into existing environments. So I can go into a customer that has vSphere, vSAN, NSX. I can now import those capabilities, essentially bring it now and convert it in under SDC Manager or VCOps management, and now I can start to deploy and build out workload domains. I can start to build out infrastructure to deploy these as a service. So the whole experience, both from that cloud admin persona as well as the consumer persona, it's changed completely, and we hope for the better.
Well, I mean, we moved 4 numbers forward, so
exactly.
I certainly hope so.
Big jump, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So before we talk features, I'd love to, just from an architecture perspective, what does VCF 9 even look like?
It looks like a single product. It really deploys now as a single solution. So rather than, bringing in all the components and then have to figure out where my password, where are my certificates, that's all been unified. So from the standpoint of looking at security as a core construct of what I'm doing as part of deploying these systems, my single sign-on, my passwords, certificates, these are all now centrally managed. So I have one place to go to be able to manage it. When you deploy it, a lot of concerns usually happen around configuration drift, right? I set my system up day 0 to be compliant with systems, but over time, things start to go out of spec. And a lot of times you just didn't know about it, right? I wasn't advised that something's gone out of spec. So we actually have triggers that look at configuration drift and not only provide corrective action, done things you should do to be able to make sure you bring it back in, but also advise as things start to drift out before they cross that threshold. So it's giving you early warning that things have actually gone out of spec.
That's great, because people have increasingly been trying to have their infrastructure be kind of this declarative model of like, this is what it should be, tell me if it's not, and then let's chunk it back to what it's supposed to be, rather than this imperative model of, I configured it was configured that way once, and then 6 months later, like, okay, why is this host drifting off or something wrong?
Or having to go look through logs to figure out what happened and what was the root cause of it. We're now actually providing that intelligence to the admin to be able to give them that capability up front.
And so I know there's different, there's different outcomes for different companies, and the features that are inside of VCF 9. I've heard it said they could be broken down into like 3 key business outcomes. Can we dive into those?
Yeah, and certainly while these have changed somewhat, it's really consistent with how we've been positioning VCF from the beginning almost, really. It's about how do I modernize infrastructure? In other words, take what I have, how can I essentially modernize infrastructure to be able to essentially deploy a cloud operating model day 1 as part of that. So that's really that first model. The second one is essentially how do I operate as a cloud? And it's not a cloud-like experience, it is a cloud experience, right? You're giving developers the ability to be able to go in day zero and be able to self-serve. I have the ability to build catalogs that I can now provide to my developers or my platform teams, where that now they can go pick and choose to be able to build infrastructure on their own. And as you said, be able to use that declarative syntax as a way to be able to figure out what is it that I need to get done as part of it. And then finally, you need to be able to make sure that it's always secure and resilient. So a lot of companies take that for granted as part of it, but we've built it into the core infrastructure. So if you look, starting from vSphere, all the security mechanisms we build into that, vSAN around the ability to do encryption, both for data at rest and data in motion, NSX, and then you can layer in security capabilities on top of that through the application network services that does now provide a lot more security as part of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, there's a lot of, so there's the core solution, but then we've also got, like you said, from a security perspective, there's add-on services for ransomware recovery, and how does that work with all the different services?
Certainly. So if you look at the core platform, we're providing essentially all the capabilities to stand up a private cloud day zero, right? So I now have that capability. But when I look at what are the use cases I want to start to expand on, or what are the scenarios I want to be able to protect myself from, that's where the advanced services come in. And I know, private AI is certainly one that's sexy and everyone's paying attention to it, but there are other fundamental services that are necessary in order to be able to provide advanced services, right? So for example, if I look at my application and network security capabilities, how can I use distributed firewalls, and how can I use network detection and response as a way to look for intrusions that come in the environment, look for that east-west traffic flow as a way to be able to identify potential issues, or where a malware may exist and they're going in trying to find assets that they can go and take advantage of. You want to be able to know about that as early as possible so that you can quarantine those workloads, essentially use microsegmentation as a way to be able to isolate it, and then use that as a way to be able to protect it so that it not only you're protecting against what's happened right now, but that if future incursions come in, you now know what to look for. We've essentially identified those by fingerprints so I can tell where those issues start to come out.
Wow. So that's something that, being able to start with that cloud, but then build on it, build that protection, build those additional stories. That's something that we're in a position that platform can build on and deliver that really nothing else can.
Absolutely. And then beyond that, right, there's a lot of other capabilities. I can bring load balancers in. So now I can use Avi as a load balancer to be able to manage the workloads within the environment itself. I can start to bring in things such as automation, where now I'm looking at if indeed I want to be able to set rules within my enterprise that once my applications move to one direction or another, I can essentially use some of the tools that are within the rest of the Broadcom portfolio to be able to add those in, to be able to provide more advanced enterprise services that tie into some of those things. And then also tie into some of the capabilities from Symantec, right? So we actually have the endpoint security that we provide both from an authentication, but also from a user privileged access standpoint. So I can define super users within the environment, leveraging those capabilities as a way to be able to onboard it. Much like I do today with Okta single sign-on, I can leverage these tools as a way to do that as well.
Oh, wow. So we can go through the whole suite.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, we went earlier when you were talking about providing like a real public cloud, like a experience for private cloud. It reminded me, I don't know if you heard it, but a couple of weeks ago, John and I had a conversation with David Lithicum, who's an industry analyst, writes a lot of good stuff on that. And we talked a lot about private cloud and its public value.
Right,
Have you had any conversations in that regard?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, David's been great in terms of really trying to look ahead as part of that. And if you follow his blog and his writings, he's wrote a lot about repatriation of workloads on-prem. And I think a lot of this has been, let's just call it, blown out of proportion, right? But a lot of organizations are going to look at the workloads that they have running in public cloud now, and are they optimized for cloud? Most cases they're not, right? They didn't do a good job of refactoring those applications once they put them in a native public cloud, and now they're looking for more cost-effective ways to be able to do that, or they're looking to be able to improve the security of those applications, or make sure that they're compliant with any regulatory requirements that they have within there. But the other thing that you're seeing now, especially with AI and Gen AI, the last thing you want to do is essentially put your IP your company's intellectual property out in a public cloud, run an LLM against it to be able to run it within a public cloud environment. Those are absolutely the workloads you want to be able to bring back on. And David writes a lot about that as well.
It's interesting because the growth in AI is showing a lot of growth in value of data that otherwise people just viewed as like, I was hoarding this data for regulatory reasons, and now it's like, oh, I can actually do something valuable with it. And someone else might actually want to build on it.
Exactly. So. Right.
Yeah, well, we don't have you for too long, and we're diving through all the various sections of VCF. But I'd love to get your takeaway, dealer's choice here. What are some of your favorite features inside of VCF 9?
Well, certainly, I think we talked about a couple of them already, right? It's that user experience, and I think those that have grown up on Cloud Foundation over the years, they're going to see a big difference in terms of their ability to be able to stand up services much faster. So I think it's that quicker time to value. That's one of the things you're going to see out of the gate as part of it. But also, if you just look at the core infrastructure, right? I mean, our bread and butter, vSphere, vSAN, NSX, there are enhancements that are being put into the core platform that are not only going to drive more value so I can get to value quicker, but also as you start to look at what's my cost profile look like, I can start to now get much better utilization of those capabilities. Memory tiering, I think, is a great example of that, right? How can I use NVMe memory that's already in those servers as a way to be able to get better utilization of the hardware footprint that I have today? So you're going to see a lot of capabilities derived from that cost saving.
Very nice, very nice. Well, we're talking to people all week. Rick, I want to thank you for joining us here on Virtually Speaking. It's always a pleasure.
Always good to be here. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.